I'm your host, T. Mitchell Bell, and we have here in the studio Miss Ann Feeney. Thank you for coming in today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you, an honor to have you here in the studio. I've just loved listening to your stuff over the years and your activism. And
Did you grow up on my music? I'm amazed at how old some of the people that grew up on my music are now.
Yeah, but I was catching up maybe over time listening to it. So Ann, in case you just joined us, you're listening to Acoustic Songs Live, and Ann has been so gracious to come in and perform for us. And normally what we have folks do is like play something right off the top just to kind of loosen up, and then we will talk about we've got all kinds of stuff to talk about, I think, today.
Well, why don't we start with the corporate welfare polka?
That sounds like a good one.
It's time to end welfare as we know it and get those greedy chiselers off the dole. It's time to end welfare as we know it. Teach them a little self-control. For far too long we've allowed these corporate hogs to belly up to the public trough. No more welfare as we know it. No more handouts. Cut them off. Oh, we should all be irate at the huge welfare state right here in this mightiest of nations. AFDC is disgraceful to me. I'm talking aid for dependent corporations. Free enterprise, ha! The cruelest of lies. It cost us billions and billions just last year. Why, if they paid their fair share, we'd have billions to spare. It's time to tell them the buck stopped here. Consider Charlie Hurwitz, the CEO at Maxam, holding Redwood Forest hostage in his cheesy little tax scam. Charlie's union busting. We paid him to pollute our water. I think that's disgusting. Charlie won't repay $500 million that he stole. Turns out it was actually $1.6 billion, but who's counting? From a Houston SNL. What say we kick him off the dole? It's time to end welfare as we know it and get those greedy chiselers off the dole. It's time to end welfare as we know it. Teach them a little self-control. For far too long we've allowed these corporate hogs to belly up to the public trough. No more welfare as we know it. No more handouts. Cut them off. That Taco Bell Chihuahua begs for bucks for Frito-Lay, and Poppin' Fresh from Pillsbury gets more dough every day. That thief Ronald McDonald and his sidekick Mayor McCheesy hamburglarized our treasury in ways that make me queasy. That nasty little mermaid took tax dollars overseas to hire thugs who brought poor Haitian workers to their knees. It's time to end welfare as we know it. Get those greedy chiselers off the dole. It's time to end welfare as we know it. Teach them a little self-control. For far too long we've allowed these corporate hogs to belly up to the public trough. No more welfare as we know it. No more handouts. Cut them off. They've been picking every pocket from sea to shining sea. We must intervene to break this cycle of dependency. ADM and Cargill, General Motors, Ford and Boeing. Actually, it wasn't Ford, but let's talk Goldman Sachs and Bank of America. And that welfare line keeps growing, growing, growing. Our Congress says we can't afford to subsidize the needy. Well, before we slash the safety net, let's tell the truly greedy. It's time to end welfare as we know it and get those greedy chiselers off the dole. It's time to end welfare as we know it. Teach them a little self-control. For far too long we've allowed these corporate hogs to belly up to the public trough. No more welfare as we know it. No more handouts, cut them off. It's for their own good. No more handouts, cut them off. And I mean banksters. No more handouts, cut them off.
Awesome. That you know, having this show is difficult when I get somebody in and I want to applaud. You know, as an interviewer, I want to just like start clapping and.
Well, you wouldn't get any complaints out of me. That was the first thing I taught my grandson to do.
It wasn't say grandma, or it was just like. Hey, go.
His latest one is, well, when the sun is, when it's the daytime, it's sunny, but in the nighttime, it's moony.
Is that song? Is it a new one, or is that off?
Oh my God, that's been rattling around for so long. And in the beginning, the only people who liked it were libertarians, so I practically quit singing it. But obviously, it's come into its own. And a documentary film that was just released about the Wall Street bailouts called Heist. If you watch clear to the end, there I am as the credits roll.
So the names keep changing, but the theme of the song stays the same.
Exactly. Huh? I wish my songs weren't so timeless.
Well, speaking of your activism and your music, it's what I was wondering was what came first, the activism or the music, or
Actually, I am a folk singer. I grew up in a house where everybody liked to sing. When we were driving home from parties and stuff, we harmonized in the car, and all I ever really liked to do was sit around with family and friends and sing. Mm-hmm. But I grew up during the folk scare, and so the first time I heard Phil Oakes, I thought, I want to do that. And it was the first time that I began to see that art could do so much more than just, you know, I mean, it builds community in any sense. You get 100 people singing and it's a community. Unfortunately, the ones who are doing all the singing seem to be, you know, the group singing seem to be in the churches. And while I have many wonderful activist friends in all denominations, I think the world was a safer place when religion was the opiate of the masses instead of the amphetamine. You know, we see a lot of activity from the religious right that's holding us back and holding them back. It's everything against their own self-interest. So it's hard to take sometimes to watch how stupid people can be.
So you started singing mainly with family, not so much in the churches?
Oh, I did not sing it. I mean, I went to Catholic school. Of course, we sang in church, but we didn't sing very good stuff. My mother was a convert, and she'd say, well, I'll tell you, I gave up a lot of music when I came into the Catholic Church. These hymns are awful. She was a Baptist.
Oh, okay. So there's much more soulful hymns and much more. Yeah, I hear you there. But I was just curious about that. As far as, you know, folks start singing, or growing up in a family maybe that was involved in activism or unions or something to that effect, and how did the activism, the union activism start? What can you think of any defining particular thing that said, I want to do that? You know.
Well, I was born in the Mon Valley, and a lot of my family lived there. Not so much anymore. I've got one cousin down there, but I grew up in Pittsburgh. My grandfather was an organizer for the United Mine Workers. He died in 1939. I never met him. But the breathtaking stories I would hear about the gangster coal and iron police and how they would string barbed wire around these company towns, and they had machine gun turrets at the perimeter, and any union organizer trying to get in there was taking his life in his hands. And my dad was born in 1910, so about the time that he was old enough to write, my grandfather would take him with him to some of these meetings, and they would sneak in under the barbed wire, and my grandfather would bring his fiddle And my dad would tell me stories about him playing the violin. He learned all the songs of all the ethnic groups he was organizing, the Slovaks and the Croatians and the Italians. And he learned all these violin tunes to gain the confidence of the workers. And also, it served a double purpose. If they were afraid that somebody was in there as a spy for the company or a stool pigeon, they'd just say, keep playing, oh, play another one, oh, play another one. It wasn't until they got everybody they didn't trust out of the room that they'd say, okay, now let's talk union. But my dad circulated the union cards and got people to sign up. And it was one of his earliest memories. So all these other little kids in my neighborhood were going to bed listening to stories about Cinderella, and I was hearing about the coal and iron police and my daring grandfather. They kind of knocked it off, though, once they realized, I got sent home from school once for saying, well, my dad said Jesus was a communist, and they were talking about, and they didn't think they liked that attitude too much. So my dad had to sit me down and explain to me that corporate bastards was not one word, it was 2 words, and you couldn't use the second one. And my dad wasn't a wild-eyed radical by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, he followed his father's advice, which was education was the key to everything. And he put himself through college and worked for 39 years for the same employer. And they pretty much cast him out like so much garbage after 39 years because the son thought that their policy of work till you die, work as long as you want, no mandatory retirement, he thought that was antiquated. And that was why my dad stayed there for 39 years, because he wanted the drop in the saddle. He couldn't imagine being idle or not going to work. He really got a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of it. He was a very gifted chemist, and he did the kind of work that he loved all day, every day. So that was a real setback for him. And I think if he had actually been a local union officer and gotten involved in all the petty crap and intrigue that keeps the labor movement so at loose ends and not getting enough done, I might not have been a labor activist. But in fact, in the early 60s, I met Jock Jablonski, who lived right around here, and he knew my grandfather.
Wow.
And so I was very excited, and he said, listen, I'd really like to get together with you. I'm really busy until the end of the year, but first of the year, let's get together.
Wow.
And we know what happened with that story.
Yeah.
So that really disillusioned me. And of course, my father, John L. Lewis, picked Tony Boyle to run the mine workers. And so my father thought John L. Lewis could do no wrong. And he said, Tony Boyle is innocent. This is a frame of, oh, how we fought in those days.
Yeah.
It was cool to be part of a generation that, all generations rebel against the generation that preceded them. But in the 20s, you could do that by smoking a cigarette and doing the Charleston. But here we were. I graduated from high school in 1968, and we were the generation that said racism is wrong and this war is wrong. And our parents were staunchly against this. My dad told me I was giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Oh, my God, how he hated Jane Fonda. And my father would, confide all these little racist observations he had made while he was in the service. And so we were just on, but think of what generation had the chance to confront their parents and and the previous generations and be right.
Yeah.
We were right, they were wrong. And they eventually admitted it. My mother turned against the war much faster. Eventually, both of my parents came to respect my, my positions and agree that I was right.
Yeah. Well, so as far as I'd like you to, in case you just joined us, we have Ann Feeney here in the studio on Acoustic Songs Live at 91.7 FM. You're listening to her history as an activist, and is there a song from that period of time that maybe you would want to play for us, or something to that effect? Like, there's always been, a war song. I know, the anti-war song, and there's a lot of artists that write them nowadays where they don't actually make it onto, the the radio. And back then, you could write a protest or an anti-war song, and you weren't censored, so to speak. But now it's like...
Well, this song was actually played on the radio when I was a kid. It's a Phil Oakes song, and it's... and I can't get all the way through it. I'm just going to give you a sample of it just so you can see both what a brilliant writer Phil Oakes was and how he had his finger right on the pulse of America, and how timely some of his stuff remains, most of his stuff remains to this day. Come get out of the way, boys. Quick, get out of the way. You better watch what you say, boys. Better watch what you say. Oh, we own half the world, oh, say can you see? And the name for our prophets is democracy. So like it or not, you will have to be free. 'Cause we're the cops of the world, boys. We're the cops of the world. The verses are just fantastic. The one thing that's changed a lot is one of Phil Oakes' most biting songs is called Love Me, I'm a Liberal, and it made fun of liberals because they weren't radical enough. And yeah, I mean, we could use a few more liberals in this world right now. Liberals brought us minimum wage. Liberals brought us the right to organize. Liberals brought us vacations, pensions, a lot of things that we kind of like. Overtime, ending child labor, public education.
Yeah,
I don't mind being a liberal.
I don't know when that became a dirty word, and you know, it's like, or who came up?
They painted us into by making liberal a dirty word. Well, then what did that make me? I was in some other universe.
That's what I actually was. You know, how did that? You know, whoever came up with the plan to somehow make that. I personally think that there's a fight going on to see who's going to be the next person on Mount Rushmore, either FDR or Ronnie Reagan. One of the two.
Oh my God! If they put Ronald Reagan on, I'm moving to Sweden.
Okay. So, would you like to do another one of your songs for us?
Oh, sure.
I would love that. And if you want to find Ann Feeney's music, you go to annfeeney.com. That's ANNEFEENEY.com, and you can pick up her CDs there. And there's all kinds of information. Yeah.
If you're driving and you didn't get that written down, though, you can go to Google and type in Union Woman Hellraiser, and it will take you right to my website. That's easier to remember. I'm the Union Woman Hellraiser. Let's see. Well, I have two kids, Dan and Amy, and when they were young, they used to complain a lot about all the things they had to forego because they lived in our house. I don't think they tasted a table grape until they were 15 or 16 years old, and that boycott finally ended. I lost my taste for them. I just started back on them. They're so good. Anyhow, my neighbor called me from her house where my son was playing, and she said, I want you to come up here and get Daniel right now. I said, oh dear, what's he done? I mean, he was 3 years old, but she said he's riding his big wheels bike around our house, and he's saying, no business, no business, no business with South Africa. She said, we don't need your son up here inflicting your politics on my children. And when he grows up, he's not going to have any friends. So I thought, wow, that's pretty scary. She said, he's going to become a stockbroker when he grows up just to annoy you. That was really scary. But I knew that would never happen. I probably would have drowned him first. But as it turns out, children of activists tend to be more effective than their parents and doing better work and with more experience. And so that idea that kids rebel by becoming conservative if you aren't, it's not true. But anyway, somebody did her thesis on it to prove it. So I thought they were going to found a 12-step group to talk about their poor lives as kids denied so many things. Adult children of politically correct parents. I thought an outfit like that deserved a theme song, don't you?
Yep.
Well, Mom and Dad, I'm almost 10. It's time we had this talk. I've done my best to please you since before I learned to walk. I swallowed all your oatmeal and your work for peace is fine. But when you pick on Super Mario, I've got to draw the line. I know you're not like other folks, but for once could we pretend, oh, let me be like other folks, why can't I have Nintendo? My kids always ask me tough questions. They'd say, how come we always put yard signs in our yard for people that lose, Mommy? Every other kid I know spends his idle hours helping Super Mario climb pillars, hills, and towers. Now how come when we go for walks, it's on some picket line? It's my turn to protest, Mommy, read this picket sign. I know you're not like other folks, but for once could we pretend, oh, let me be like other kids, why can't I have Nintendo? Let's see. So there's a time we were driving down to the Kerrville Folk Festival, which is one of my favorite festivals. It's an 18-day camping festival in the hill country of Texas, the beautiful hill country. And that was kind of my kids and my roundup every year, where we'd get together and talk about deeper things than we managed to spit out during the week. So it was a great chance for me to impart my maternal wisdom to them, driving that 26 hours down there with 2 overnight stops. And I was so busy imparting maternal wisdom one day somewhere near Charleston that I ran out of gas. But like a good mommy, I had lots of art supplies in the car, and before I could get pulled over to the side of the road, they had a nice little out of gas sign made up, cute as Christmas. And of course, the first car that came by picked us up. And we get into the car. I'm in the front seat. The kids are in the back. The guy's pulling off the road. He has a gas can, which is good because I don't. And he's going to take us back to the car and everything. It was just very wonderful. And as he's pulling into the gas station, my daughter from the back seat pipes up. She says, "Excuse me, we're boycotting Exxon. Would you mind going across the road to that other gas station, please?" And he did. He thought it was really cute. Sometimes I worry what would happen in a war. It's not that I don't like the things you're working for. So don't get angry if I ask you just once more. Please, 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 please. Let's see what else. There were so many great stories about my kids growing up. Well, I'll take it home since we're on the radio and have limited amount of time. I don't mind recycling and camping out is fine. If you'd only boycott cauliflower, I'd be first in line. G.I. Joe and laser tag were out, I always knew. So when I go down to Billy's house, what do you think we do? We turn on his TV set and for hours upon end, I act just like the other kids and freak out on Nintendo. So can't I be like other kids? Why can't I have Nintendo? Not on your life.
Awesome. That I'll have to play that for my kids. That, you know, between the Nintendo DSs and the iPod Touches and the iPod
Xbox.
Minis and the, you know, they're the most plugged-in generation, and it's scary.
I'm so glad I kind of escaped a lot of that. I was out performing. My kids were born, and I still had a Radio Shack that didn't have a hard drive; it just had a floppy drive. Yeah, that was, and I didn't like it, and I didn't really get anything into the house that was useful until the late '80s. And although my kids, eventually got on, it wasn't endless. Well, we never had a TV, a game system for the television. I just couldn't stand that. I've never had a tolerance for stupid noise. I think I inherited it from my mother. Just somebody tapping on the table. Could you cut that out? So you could just imagine what my nerves would have been like with a Game Boy in the house.
Well, I think we had talked about this, that I used to work in the tech world before, and I was out in Seattle in '99, and we had talked about of all the I guess protests that you've been to, of all the different things that you've played at, would you say that that was probably the WTO was?
Well, Seattle '99 was breathtaking because it was so well organized and because we won. The paradigm shifted. You know, when we got to Seattle, it was pretty much saying these people are all superfluous. They don't speak for anybody. We don't want anything to do with them. 60,000 trade union leaders, educators. I mean, it was unbelievable the way they dismissed us. And they were not about regulating process, just products. It was a trade organization, and we should just shut up and stay at home. And by the time that was over, it was, we care about the environment. We care about labor rights. We care about child labor. But we're better able to do it than you are. But we did absolutely shift the paradigm, and we shut them down, which was very exciting. And it was a wonderful thing. This is November of 1999 when the World Trade Organization decided to have its ministerial. And while the WTO is still ridiculously opaque, that being the opposite of transparent, about what they do. And while the business end has won every single case brought to the secret tribunal that arbitrates labor claims and social justice claims, and those records are sealed and we're not allowed to see them. I mean, I think if people were paying a little bit more attention, they would be darn angry. Mm-hmm. It's a travesty to watch the great gains that all of the social democracies made in the 20th century being completely undone and vanishing into the memory hole.
So I had my personal experience with unions, at least being in a union. I can't say I've ever been in one. I mean, I've never worked in an occupation where I would have had an opportunity to join one.
Well, let me tell you about the Pittsburgh Musicians Union or Local 1000.
That'd be the exception which I should join. My experience that I have had though with my friend who was an iron worker in Local 3, and he was telling me all about NAFTA and how bad it was. And, I was not aware.
And at the time, you're just thinking, oh, these protectionist unions, what do they know?
Yeah. And right out of high school, I got out of high school in ¡79, and I thought I was going to go work at Washington Steel because my grandmother had worked there for 30 years, and she was, the executive secretary. So she worked she was definitely white collar,
Right.
They were definitely like hardcore Republican white collar folks, And I remember going to get the interview, like talking to the head guy that she actually got hired, that did all the hiring. He goes, well, if you would have worked in the shop, as, if you had a father or somebody that worked in the shop, I could probably get you on. And then he went into this long thing about affirmative action and blah, 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 blah. So in 1980, when the whole Reagan Revolution came in,
right.
They played all to those factors that, there were all these things that were killing jobs and blah, 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 blah. But the reality
of who killed the jobs now.
Right. Now, 30 years later, and you see what, has happened with the American worker, and how the American workers are now foreign workers making stuff for us to consume. And, organizations like the WTO have just played into that whole, it's not played into it, but created that whole globalization.
Right. There's nothing the matter with the global community. I'm all about trade, but it's not exactly trade when we shut down a plant here, move it over there. We're not trading. We're outsourcing the good jobs in this country, and the other country is not making any money off it. We just pile the debt onto these developing nations, and to the point where, and the average worker sees nothing, no benefit, no improvement, and the impression is in this country that, over in India they can live on 20 cents a day, and they're glad to get it, and that's just not true. Mm-hmm. Workers are really suffering, and they're suffering at the hands of American corporations and American-controlled corporations. And we need to pay attention to what's going on because it is a global community now, and those people know, the children who are making the toys in China know where they're going. Mm-hmm. And they're not part of that life or lifestyle and never will be. So I really think that there have been some pretty serious decisions made. I think part of the reason the right doesn't care about the environment is because they have no use for about 90% of us, and they're hoping about 90% of us disappear. They don't care what happens to our schools. They don't care what happens. We're going back to a sort of reverse feudalism, to feudalism. We're going to have a bunch of serfs that have terrible educations and all the handguns they can get their hands on. We're loading the cities with handguns, and we're just hoping that some disease or earthquake or poisoned water or something takes out 90%. And then there's plenty. There's plenty for the 10% of the people who are going to survive that. Mm. They'll have all the resources that they need, and in 50 or 60 years, maybe some of the water will clear itself up, and maybe the air will be breathable again. But
that's a pretty bleak outlook, though, to think of.
I wish I could make it serious enough for people to pay attention and understand that that's the direction we're moving in, and we don't have a whole lot of time to stop climate change. We don't have a whole lot of time to protect the workers' rights. If we let the post office go and public education go, if we punish our teachers, we're headed to a very bad place. When I was a kid, if you got a job in the post office, you had it made. The kids I went to high school with, that got jobs with the airlines or with the postal service or the mill, they were pretty much guaranteed a decent job for life, and it didn't pay
a pension.
And a pension, paid vacation, paid sick days. I was actually kind of horrified to find out, I can't remember the percentage now, but a ridiculous number of people are working without paid sick days. So that no matter how sick you are, you need to drag yourself into work if you want to get paid.
It's a race to the bottom. It really is. I mean, when they talk about we're competing in a world market,
one might say it's a war on the workers.
There we go. Oh, that's a good segue.
Listen up. We've got a war zone here today, right in our heartland. Now are our unions here to stay? These multinational bad guys don't use tanks and guns, it's true. Bad guys was not the original word. Don't use tanks and guns, it's true. But they declared a war on us. Fight back, it's up to you. Oh, it's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. Oh, it's a war on the workers, and it's time we started calling the shots. Going to work could be the death of you and me, but we're not unarmed. Our weapons, solidarity. Jim Beals and Karen Silkwood, all that list goes on and on. With every year that passes, countless thousands more are gone. Oh, it's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. Oh, it's a war on the workers, and it's time we started calling the shots. They can lock us out, they can lock us up, we cannot give in. No more lies, no compromise, we'll battle till we win. Oh, it's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers, and it's time we started calling the shots. When they go slashing your pay, it's a war on the workers. You better learn what to say. It's a war on the workers. When they talk privatization and cooperation, when they talk flexibility, every working stiff can see it's a war on the workers. When they talk WTO, you'd best be screaming hell no. When I sing this song in Sweden, they say to me, "Now, Anne, Why are you just so hard to get along with? You know, don't we want to cooperate? Aren't we all on a team? Don't we want to be flexible? And I said, well, I don't know what it's like in Sweden where 8 out of 10 workers belong to a union, but I can tell you in the United States that any jerk with an MBA can walk into the post office and introduce his new productivity scheme. And so in the United States, flexibility means learning how to bend over backwards, stand on your head, and kiss your boss's butt at the same time. And that's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. Oh, it's a war on the workers, and it's time we started calling the shots. When they start fracking your water, don't go like lambs to the slaughter. Say it's a war on the workers when they poison your air. Speak up and show that you care. It's a war on the workers when they privatize the postal service. It's a war on the workers. You'd best be getting nervous, 'cause it's a war on the workers. War on the work. Oh, it's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. It's a war on the right to organize. It's a war on the 8-hour day. It's a war on child labor protections. It's a war on public education. It's a war on the United States Postal Service. Thanks to GATT, NAFTA, the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO, it's a worldwide war. Oh, it's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. Oh, it's a war on the workers. And it's time, sisters and brothers, you know, it's time right now. Get in touch with the fractivists in your area, because you can't eat money, you can't drink money, and you can't breathe money. So whatever money's coming in here, it's a short love affair. They'll jilt you. It's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers. It's a war on the workers, and it's time we started calling the shots.
Wow. I'm so glad you played that. And in case you just joined us, you're listening to Acoustic Songs Live, and we have Ann Feeney here in the studio playing some songs for us, talking about her lifetime of activism, labor activism, environmental activism, just activism. And it's been like such a pleasure to have you come in here and play for me and for everybody out there in radio land. And you can go to acousticsongs.com, and we will have the podcast and the video up on there as soon as I am able to get it completed. And Ann Utah Phillips said that you're the best labor singer in North America. That must have been.
He was the one who should know. I said, stop saying that, Bruce. They're going to write it down. He said, that's why I'm saying it, Ann.
And yeah, and there, when you get comments from Pete Seeger and Peter Yarrow and accolades from all those folks, I should say, that
you know, Peter, Paul, and Mary were also the reason I got a guitar. Somebody gave me their songbook and their live album, and it had all the songs that they were playing. Do we have time for one more, or are we finished?
No. We're not finished.
Oh, okay.
You've been fighting for other people all these years, and you've also had your own personal battle that we, Yeah,
I try to avoid the military metaphors with cancer. I'm a I appear to be a survivor of small cell lung cancer, which is pretty much unheard of. I'm a total medical outlier. They say it's total, defiance of the statistics. But I said, well, I spent my whole life being defiant, so I was practicing for this all along. It's the only thing I've practiced for.
So you're okay though, as far as, are you in remission? I know you went through a bunch.
They don't use the word remission. I mean, small cell lung cancer has like a 0% survival rate practically. It's really. At first they were saying 20%, but then I started looking at the numbers, and the 1-year survival rate was about 10, and the 2-year survival rate is non-existent. It's way down there, and I'm a 2.5 years. So, and I feel great, and I look great. Fabulous.
You look great, and you're performing great, and thank God for that. And I'm so thankful that you were here and playing for us today. And I know that that there were some benefit concerts and stuff like that that people put on for you. And
oh, God. Some of them were just incredible. The one in New York, they said, well, yeah, we'll call around and see who we can get. And I said, okay. So she says, well, the first person I called said yes. And I said, great. And she says, yeah, it was Pete Seeger. I said, really? So I mean, I run into Pete a bunch of times. In fact, Pete's had a big role to play in my activist life. Every time I saw him for the first 20 years, he'd have some little task he thought I ought to do. Well, Ann, 1992 is the 100th anniversary of the Homestead Steel Strike. Don't you think you ought to do something about that in Pittsburgh? And so the next thing I know, the Smoky City Music Festival told me they'd do it. They'd make Homestead the theme of the festival that year. If I could get Pete Seeger to come in and play for free, if I could get $10,000 worth of money pledged by unions, because they were sure they were going to lose corporate sponsorship if we did the Homestead strike. And what was the third thing? I don't know. They asked me to do 3 things. I felt like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, But I did it all. Pete came in and played for free, and
wow,
it was just it was a fantastic weekend. And another thing he talked me into was hosting the People's Music Network Winter Gathering, and we in I think that was 1989. I had 260 songwriters from all over North America descend on Pittsburgh, and I got them gigs out in the community. I organized workshops and child care and food and for all these people over that weekend. That was really fun. The third thing Pete Seeger dropped on me was, well, gee, Ann, you're active in so many other unions and help so many other unions. Have you thought about getting more active in the musicians' union? And that led to years and years of union meetings and activism within the Pittsburgh Musicians Union, and eventually becoming the only woman ever elected president of the Pittsburgh Musicians Union in their 107-year history, I think, at this point. Oh, it might be more than that. It's 117.
Wow.
So that's pretty exciting, and I love unions. I love what they've done for the country and for the people. And it's so easy to poke fun at them because they're a democratic organization. Unlike corporate America, they're democratic. And so if somebody's popular and people like him, he's president, and nobody's doing too many background checks on these people. Eventually, if you've got somebody who's in there who's no good, you can get them out with an election. But it's the same problems with incumbents everywhere. It's hard to get rid of them, but you can. And
so I would direct everybody to go to your website, and there is a link there for buying and CDs at CD Baby. Is that the primary place where they sell? Yeah,
CD Baby's awesome. Yeah, they treat artists so well. They treat the buyers so well, and they treat their own employees really well too. So I'm very enamored of them.
Well, there's a link on your website at annfeeney.com, and all you have to do is Google, what did you say earlier?
Union Woman Hellraiser.
Union Woman Hellraiser, and it will come right up. But if you go to CD Baby, Union Made is her link there on CD Baby. You can buy CDs, and there's also a donate button on PayPal to help out with.
These last 2.5 years have been really rough on me. It's one thing to. I had pretty decent medical insurance, so the medical bills weren't killing me, although it was about $500 a month. But what was to have no money coming in? Yeah. My husband always said. Always said, How many people do you think worked as hard as you did last year and cleared $1,500? I'd say, well, honey, you have to spend money to make money. And he'd say, I think there's a little more to it than that, or you'd be rich by now.
It's true. Work is what you do and what you love doing. And I don't know how that got flipped around either, that somehow, farmers don't work like as hard as a corporate farm. The family farms and all these other things that have changed. Well,
we're going back. The days of corporate agribusiness, I think, are grinding down. There's just too many. I mean, when you watch these people in famine in Africa who actually have a democracy and read up on what's going on, and they say, no, keep your GMO corn. We don't want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do have time for probably one more.
A short one. I've got it.
No, you're good. We started a little
I
late,
know,
so
but we'll need to talk more too.
Okay. And what are you going to play for us now?
Well, I'm going to play the song that I was sitting at home one day, and I got a call, and I recognized the voice. It was Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary. And he said, listen, we've heard from 2 different people that you have a great song that would be really good for us about civil disobedience. And I said, well, yeah, I do. And he said, do you have it recorded? And I said, no, but I'll go record it now and send you a copy. And he says, no, I don't want you to get in the studio and waste any money. Why don't you just sing it to me over the phone? And I had just finished writing the 3rd verse because my original 3rd verse involved, it had the word ass in it. And I could not imagine Peter, Paul, and Mary ever saying, so they hauled her ass away. They would not say that on stage. So I rewrote the 3rd verse, and I had just finished it. So I had the paper in front of me. I still didn't have the song nailed down. And I'm playing it for him. And the whole time I'm playing, I'm thinking about every record I ever bought because I thought it had a really cool cover and thought the music must be great. And I put it on, and like halfway through the first song, I knew it wasn't anything I wanted. And the whole time I'm singing, I'm waiting for him to say, well, wasn't that something? Best of luck in all your future endeavors. And that's all I was thinking while I was playing. But here it is. Was it Cesar Chavez? Maybe it was Dorothy Day. Some will say Dr. King or Gandhi set them on their way. No matter who your mentors are, it's pretty plain to see. If you've been to jail for justice, you're in good company. Have you been to jail for justice? I want to shake your hand. Sitting in and lying down are ways to take a stand. Have you sung a song for freedom or marched that picket line? Have you been to jail for justice? Oh, you're a friend of mine. You law-abiding citizens, listen to this song. Laws were made by people, and people can be wrong. Once unions were against the law, but slavery was fine. Women were denied the vote, and children worked the mine. The more you study history, the less you can deny it. A rotten law stays on the books till folks like us defy it. Have you been to jail for justice? I want to shake your hand. Sitting in and lying down are ways to take a stand. Have you sung a song for freedom or marched that picket line? Have you been to jail for justice? Oh, you're a friend of mine. Now the law's supposed to serve us, and so are the police. When that system fails, it's up to us to speak our piece. It takes eternal vigilance for justice to prevail. So get courage from your convictions. Let them haul you off to jail. Have you been to jail for justice? I want to shake your hand. Sitting in and lying down are ways to take a stand. Have you sung a song for freedom or marched that picket line? Have you been to jail for justice? Will you go to jail for justice? Have you been to jail for justice? Oh, you're a friend of mine.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's it was either that one or War on the Workers. I think I heard on Democracy Now.
Oh, you could have heard either one.
Yeah.
But when I finished the song on the phone for Peter, my heart was just pounding like a jackhammer. And he said, that's perfect. That's just what Peter, Paul, and Mary are looking for right now. Will you send it to us? And if somebody had told me when I was 15 years old, struggling along with the D run and the times they are changing, that I just couldn't get. If somebody had tiptoed up to me and said, 30 years from now, Peter, Paul, and Mary are going to be singing a song of yours, I would have said, take me now, I'm ready. And it certainly has been an amazing experience to hear them many times. That was a staple in all of their shows for the last 4 or 5 years that they were, till Mary died, and Peter still does it in every show. I don't know if Noel does it or not, but anyway, it's been a real thrill to hear that song sandwiched in between Blowin' in the Wind and If I Had a Hammer.
And to think about it, though, I'm sure a lot of other people are covering that song.
They are, and it's gotten legs in exactly the way I wanted it to. People say, we're going to get arrested tomorrow. Can you teach me this song? And I've taught it to people over the phone the night before a demonstration, and they were singing it in Copenhagen when they evacuated all the children. There's a place called Ungdomshuset that was given in perpetuity to the children of Denmark for after-school activities and so on. And eventually the fiscally responsible government of Denmark sold it to some entrepreneur who promised not to change the mission of the building, but he did. And as they were being evicted, I could hear them singing. Likewise, when Daniel Ellsberg was arrested protesting the tar sands pipeline.
Yeah.
Or was it the war?
Ellsberg?
Yeah.
When he was arrested for joining Assange or for protesting that, or when you say was it the tar sands, or that they were just arrested for down in D.C.
Right,
last week?
that
was the climate.
Well, actually, they kept a vigil there for over a month with people getting arrested every day.
Oh, okay.
Over 1,000 people were arrested on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
initial action, but anyhow, it might have been Julian Assange or Bradley Manning. But
Yeah,
there are so
it
many,
might have. Yeah.
so many things going wrong in this country right now. This is not a good time to say, "I'll just sit it out and see what happens." You're siding with the enemy.
Well, I think the pendulum's swinging back.
I do too. People are smarter than they used to be, and I give a lot of credit to Occupy for coming up with the 99% analysis, because people understand that it's not right for 1% of the people to run the country, and that's pretty much what's going on right now. So
yeah. I think that the pendulum swings back in the last 30 years of the really undoing of I would say the extreme right capitalism undoing of our country really is what's happened, and it'll swing back the other way.
I think so too.
And I think the environment is probably the linchpin thing that's going to do it. I really think that we start making stuff here in the United States again. That we
downsize. We go small. We don't have to have one bank and one phone company and one
McMansions and
cable company. It's all right if we have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of them. It's good for business.
Well, everybody bought into the whole, the whole look what my neighbor has, and everybody bought into. I can put that on the credit card and put that into my mortgage and roll that over into this and roll into that, and there's everything's so. Yeah,
we don't make stuff anymore. We make deals.
Yeah.
But, I can't believe that I was on here for an hour and I didn't mention. I have a new double CD out, and it's called Enchanted Way, and it's 24 Irish songs.
Awesome.
And I made it as a love token to give to the people who come to Ireland with me. And every year I take a small group of people to Ireland for a week, and it is so much fun. It's a wonderful, wonderful time. And I hope that some of you who are listening, you're thinking, well, gee, I wonder what I'm doing September 29th to October 8th, because you could be in the west of Ireland with me listening to wonderful music every night. You don't have to listen. I'll tell my Irish stories over there. I won't tell you all the American political stuff when we're on the bus. No captives.
All right. Well, I hope to make that trip. I don't know if I will be able to, but so I've always have to plan things around my kids' school, and
right.
That's just when school starts and all that good stuff. And but
school's been in a month by then.
Well, but the UK is on my list of that's my ancestry too, so I want to get there. But thank you so much for coming in. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mitch. This was really a blast
to have you on, and had a chance to talk and get to know you better. We've corresponded over the years, but and in case You're listening to WNJR in Washington, Pennsylvania, and we stream the show live at WNJR.org and also at 91.7 FM in Washington. And we'll see you next week when we'll have the next artist. I can't think off the top of my head who's coming in next week. But this is Acoustic Songs Live from WNJR in Washington, Pennsylvania.
And I have one more shout out to my cousin Bill.
I'm sorry?
My cousin Bill's the pastor at Immaculate Conception. I meant to say.
Oh,
I give
I'm
him
sorry,
a
I
shout
didn't mean
out.
to cut you off. I was like.